Hello there, YouTube. It's your boy B3, back with another kicking graphic novel review. Today we are looking at Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E, Volume 1, War of the Monsters, from DC Comics New 52 by Jeff Lemire and Alberto Ponticelli. Now, I have to give a full disclaimer before this. I'm probably going to talk about the James Gunn Creature Commandos in this. That's not out yet at the time of recording. But if I remember correctly, it's definitely going to be out by the time of posting. I record these pretty far in advance. I sit and I record a whole batch of these, and then I schedule a week between each one. So right now, at the time of recording this, it's like the beginning of August 2024. And I have them scheduled into next year already. So I'm going to talk about this book as if that show isn't out, but when this drops, I don't remember if it's a show or a movie, but when this drops, that will be out. Okay? So, let's talk about Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E, Volume 1, War of the Monsters, which is a very quote-unquote public domain Gamera title. But, let me read you the back of the book. He who fights monsters. S.H.A.D.E, the superhuman advanced defense executive. For decades, they have defended the Earth against the threats too eldritch and terrible to reveal to the public at large. Cliché, but fine. And one man, one monster, has been their secret weapon. Frankenstein. Whether battling alongside his lady or serving solo, S.H.A.D.E's premier super agent has sworn to slay or be slain in service of S.H.A.D.E's director, the mysterious Father Time. But this mission is different. To stop a stream of monsters emerging from a small town, Frank must join forces with a new team of creature commandos. Just as monstrous and deadly as he, will they be enough to turn the tide? Or will Frankenstein's blade sing the song of slaughter no more? Okay, that read-up goes pretty fucking hard. Written by Eisner Award nominee Jeff Lemire, who worked on Animal Man Sweet Tooth and Swamp Thing Green Hell. I have reviewed his entire Animal Man run. It's incredible. Check it out. I've also reviewed Swamp Thing Green Hell. And illustrated by acclaimed artist Alberto Ponticelli from Unknown Soldier, and featuring an OMAC guest appearance, as if anyone cared. Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E, War of the Monsters collects issues 1 through 7 and is a tale of mad science at its bloody best. I don't know about its bloody best. I want to talk about this book and how it feels like DC Comics didn't have any confidence in it. Now, the New 52 came around when MCU hype was incredibly high. The Avengers movie was about to come out. Iron Man was still a pretty recent memory as far as films go. And Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E very much sounds like Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yes, S.H.I.E.L.D. was big at this point in time because they were bringing the MCU and the Avengers together. They very clearly gave this a title that sounds like Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. intentionally. They did not want to call it Creature Commandos. But they should have just called it Creature Commandos. That title has history in its name, you know? I really want to read that complete collection of the original Creature Commandos. And I'm sure that by the time this is out, there will probably be a new Creature Commandos title. I haven't actually been keeping up with DC Comics like at all. The only thing I'm really keeping up with right now is the Massive Verse from Image. So I'm behind on everything DC. It might even be out already. But there's no way in hell they're not going to have a new Creature Commandos title to ride the hype off the James Gunn animation. So we're definitely going to have one. It's just, I like alliteration. And it's a name with history, and it's more accurate because Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E would be a fine title for a book just about Frankenstein, and he is the main character, but there's so many other Creature Commandos, you know? There's so many other Creature Commandos. So, let's start the book. The art throughout is fine. Like, it's good horror book art. I like it, but there are some character models and faces and stuff that seem inconsistent throughout this book, and that felt odd. It took me out of it a little bit. And there's so much exposition in the beginning. Oh my god, there's so much. There's like this, like, Ray Palmer is one of the scientists for S.H.A.D.E, but this is, once again, remember, this is the beginning of the New 52, so he's not the Atom right now. The Atom doesn't exist. Because you remember you had a fake Atom in Justice League. Huge spoiler, but it's like over a decade old, so don't get mad at me. And then I think he finally appeared as the Atom in the Batman-Superman title during the New 52. It took him a while, but it's his tech that's running this place. There's like this shrunken floating base in Manhattan, but it's so tiny that nobody can mess with it. So people shrink down and they go into it, which is fine, but this exposition is just like a computer reading you data files, and it's like, oh my god, this is such a bore. And you got Father Time, who is now in the body of a little girl. It's like this immortal guy who every like decade gets a new body. Now he's in the body of like a little Japanese girl who wears a domino mask for some reason. And then Frankenstein and the bride are now divorced. Okay. Sure. The bride is fine. And then we meet the Creature Commandos. There's Khalees, who's this really mysterious mummy guy. And he actually is an ancient mummy monster. But then you have Vincent Velcoro, who is their vampire, and Warren Griffith, who is their werewolf. And they're bioengineered to be those things. They're not like the actual spooky kind. They're the science kind. And then also Dr. Nina Mazursky, who is their creature from the Black Lagoon. She is the one that created the Creature Commandos, but she made herself into a Creature Commando because she was like, this is kind of a horrible thing to do to people, and if I'm going to do this to people, I have to be willing to do it to myself. So she turned herself into an aquatic Creature Commando. And Dr. Nina is 100%, without a doubt, the most interesting character in this book. Father Time is nothing to me. Ray Palmer is a fine side character. Frankenstein and all the others are much more cliche, but they're like fun cliches. I mean, you don't read a book like this based off the Universal monsters without expecting cliches. You know what I mean? That's kind of part of the fun of it. And this book does let itself be fun sometimes, which I like. But most of that fun comes from the interactions between our werewolf and vampire. And not a lot of it comes from our titular character, who's a bit of a downer, but he is cool. But Dr. Nina is the best. She's so cool. She is so cool. And they do change how she looks later in the book. I think it's because, well, she's clearly Abe Sapien. She's literally Abe Sapien with tits. And so they change her color later in the book to be more Creature from the Black Lagoon-y. Like more the Creature from the Black Lagoon green and less of the Abe Sapien blue. So, I'm sorry. So, when I first saw that, I was like, wow, these character models are not consistent. But then I read the rest of the book and I was like, oh, like she changes color in issue 2 and then stays that color the whole run. I guess, well, the whole trade. And I was like, oh, they definitely did that for legal reasons. That was a legal reasons color change, for sure. And, you know, for the trade, they could have gone back and recolored her in issue 1, and they didn't. And I kind of respect that. That would have been really easy to do. I do respect that, in a way. But they go to this town where all these eldritch horrors are coming up out of a lake, and it turns out the townspeople have been feeding them children to try to stop their invasion for years. But it turns out they're not really the eldritch monsters you think they are. They're aliens that come through these portals and invade planets. They're parasites. They suck a planet dry, then they move on to the next one after they reproduce or whatever. It's standard alien fare, standard mindless alien army fare, you know? I think I would have preferred them as eldritch abominations, but it seems like the aliens were... they thought it was funny that the people were feeding them children to get them to stop, so they just kind of toyed with humans and let them do that for a couple centuries. Pretty funny. Pretty funny. But there is one cover art with the other creature commandos coming out of Frankenstein's head, and he looks very Boris Karloff-y in it. I thought I'd mention that. That's a cover art for issue 2. So yeah, they go through this portal to fight these monsters, and we're getting a decent little origin for Dr. Nina, where she originally created monsters from scratch and grew them super fast, but they didn't have empathy and stuff. They weren't able to develop it with the way they were made, so she had to make the creature commandos out of people that already had empathy and social skills and stuff. Blah blah blah. It was a really great little origin intro. She's the best character in the book. The book should be about her. I swear to God, she's so cool. I need an action figure of that gal. But, yeah, we continue into the book, and they go to the alien planet, and they're killing all these aliens, and it turns out there's 3 extra big aliens that are the size of mountains that they have to kill. And they kill them not only really easily, but in pretty cliche ways. The first one rises up out of the earth. It eats Frankenstein. And then everyone's like, what do we do? And you as the viewer are just you as the reader are just he's going to cut himself out of that thing. We all know exactly what's going to happen. It's super cliche. Even James Gunn himself did it in, I believe, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2? With Drax at the very beginning. Yeah, you just see it and you're yeah, I know exactly where this is going. What, you expect me to think Frankenstein is dead? Come on. But I do like the next cover art for issue 3, because it is very classic monster movie poster looking. And it turns out the planet is alive and sentient and psychic, and it sends out this psychic message to help get these big parasites off of it. Which they do help, but there's one, it's the fish parasite monster, the one for the ocean. It's easy to defeat because they don't really have to fight it at all. It thinks that Dr. Nina is its mate, despite the fact that she's not the size of a mountain. And all the little fish monsters it spawns think that she's their mom, so they can kill it super easily. It's that wasn't intriguing at all, and it doesn't even make sense. It was kind of stupid. But they do that, they beat it, they get back to Earth, they save Earth from these parasites, but they also save that living planet from its parasites as well. It's grateful, and it goes home. Then we see Frankenstein fight a bunch of little dwarf dudes, and he has to fight Omak and Brother Eye, the new 52 ones that nobody cared about. And he does, and I guess it's just a crossover to boost sales for both books. This was still at the beginning of the New 52. They were trying to figure out what worked, what didn't. Their foundation, a lot of the New 52 is bad, but there were a lot of good things. Batman, Swamp Thing, etc. So yeah, he fights Omak. Brother Eye infiltrates their systems, though, and they have these flesh golems that only live for 24 hours, and then they turn to goo, and the goo gets recycled to power their base. And they're not sentient or sapient or anything. They're just kind of mindless drones that follow orders. And Brother Eye, to kind of fuck with them, gives them sentience. So then the next story is them having to fight against these sentient golems. And everyone was telling Father Time. They were like, this is bad. Frankenstein is like, look, I'm also the product of someone who tampered with life, and I can tell you right now what you're doing is going to backfire. And it almost immediately does. It does it within volume 1. Because of course it fucking does. Right? Of course it fucking does. But then they also have to go fight this giant atomic soldier in Vietnam. And you look at him, you take one look, and he's this big red naked guy who's Captain Atom-esque. And you're just like, that's Dr. Manhattan. They call him Colonel Quantum, which is an awesome name. It's so comic booky and I love it. But he kind of he was killing people during the Vietnam War, in Vietnam, for the U.S. government. And he was disillusioned. He was like, why are we here, Frank? We shouldn't be here. We're the bad guys. And he kind of deserts and just lives in Vietnam quietly for decades. And Frankenstein at first was mad at him for abandoning his post, but then Frankenstein, of course, was also disillusioned later and was like, Colonel Quantum was totally right. He was completely right. We shouldn't have been there. But he's a big, naked Captain Atom kind of guy, which is what Dr. Manhattan was in Vietnam too. So this is clearly inspired by Watchmen, but it's not the same thing. This is actually kind of cool. It's not disrespectful to Watchmen. It's something that was clearly inspired by it and grew off just the small concept of Dr. Manhattan in Vietnam, but also struggling with his humanity and stuff. It's bred from that. And to be honest, I would have liked if this was more than just a real short bridging story for bigger arcs, because this was pretty good. And it turns out like he's been just isolating himself in Vietnam for so long that it's driven him insane, and he doesn't know how to kill himself. It's like almost impossible. He doesn't know how to do it. And he's like grown all these cancerous tumors because he's a radioactive dude. And he released this pulse that killed a ton of people in Vietnam because he was so desperate to get Frankenstein to come back and kill him. And Frankenstein gives him like this mercy killing, but it doesn't like work at first, and it's making his radioactivity go more out of control, but then eventually he turns back to human and he gets to rest. And it was pretty good. I liked it a lot. It was an appropriate amount of inspiration from Watchmen and also new ideas and stuff. I liked it. It was pretty good. And then, of course, while that's happening, the Bride and Dr. Nina, aka Best Girl, are fighting off the golems, but then the golems shut down the prison that has Dr. Nina's original creature commandos in it. And they're very cool. One is kind of like the Blob, and then one is clearly the Invisible Man. And then there's two other ones. One is like this kind of big reptilian creature, which could be inspired by literally anything. And then the other is this woman covered in like these quills, who for some reason I thought was really cool. There's this movie, I think it's like an indie movie called Spike or Spine or something, where this guy kidnaps this woman, and I haven't seen the movie, I've seen the trailer, but the trailer kind of stuck with me in a weird way, and she reminds me of that. So they're having to fight back these humanoids, but now they also have these original insane creature commandos to deal with, and Dr. Nina doesn't want to hurt them. She kind of sees them as her children, because she lost a child in her former human life, and she doesn't want to hurt them. Because originally, S.H.A.D.E was going to just kill them when they didn't pan out, and she's the one that talked them into just imprisoning them. So, yeah. That, I guess, didn't work out for her. I mean, we knew they'd come back, right? You know that from the beginning. As soon as they're mentioned and it says they're in a prison, you're like, oh, they're coming back, dude. There's also a fun little bit where the werewolf and the vampire, whose names I can't be bothered to remember, are like in this fancy weapons locker, looking at all these crazy, insane weapons, like a gun that shoots buzzsaws and shit, and they're like, oh man, look at this dope stuff. Let's get out there and fucking kill some humanoids with these crazy weapons. Fun stuff. Fun stuff. Anyhow, there was another creature in that prison, turns out. And they also escaped. And this is like the first thing that has phased Father Time in this whole book. Father Time has been unfazed, kind of a cocky jackass. I do not like Father Time at all. They're stupid. But at the end, it's revealed that Frankenstein's son is the other thing that escaped and got free. And it's kind of a big reveal, and I honestly am excited to see where it goes from here. And there's like a cover sketches, art gallery, and stuff in the back that a lot of trades have. And while this trade wasn't great, and it had a lot of stuff in it that was stupid or very ex machina-y, and it's not a great book, but it's an okay start. And I do want to read the next volume. I do. Am I rushing to read the next volume? No. I'm not like, oh, I gotta read this right now. No, I'll be fine waiting till it goes on, like, Black Friday sale or something later in the year. That's actually when I get most of my trades, is Black Friday. I get them all when they're dirt cheap in Black Friday, and I get myself, like, a whole stock of them to read throughout the year. It saves me hundreds of dollars. But this was an okay book. It was fine. And you'll probably see a lot of people reading it once Creature Commandos comes out. Once again, I am recording this before it comes out, but almost certainly posting it after. So enjoy that, I suppose. But I liked it. I wish they would have just called it Creature Commandos. And Frankenstein is clearly the main character. I think exploring them more as a team unit would be interesting. But they do put a lot of emphasis on Dr. Nina, which is good, because they clearly recognize that she's the best character in the book by far. No competition. But that's it. Thank you all very much for your support. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. Check out all the cool links in the description below. Twitter, my store where you can buy comics. You can buy comics on my eBay page and also in my physical store in Georgia. Thank you all once again. See you all next time. Bye for now.